I'm Jess and I'm excited to be here to sew the Veronica bag with you. This bag is modern with a slight retro vibe, so it's the perfect handmade bag to add to your wardrobe. First of all, welcome to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel. If you like sewing or making fashion-forward projects, our YouTube channel is the place to be. Our Veronica bag pattern was inspired by our New Year's Eve sew-along with Sulky, which was 80s themed. Our New Year's Eve sew-along event with Sulky is one of my favorite parts of the holiday season, and I truly appreciate you spending the final hours of the year sewing along with us. This pattern was designed by the talented Kate Bashinsky, who's a pattern designer here at Sallie Tomato, and one of the inspirations for this bag was the 80s song Veronica by Elvis Costello. Today I'm going to take you step by step on how to make the entire project. This project features a zipper flap pocket, concealed front zipper pocket under the flap, interior slip pocket, adjustable strap or handle, and an optional studded side detail. These features make our retro Veronica bag totally modern. This medium-sized bag pairs very well with our Bella wallet and Lucky Penny wallet, which you can find at your local Sallie Tomato retailer or on our website. This bag can truly be made to fit your individual style and is perfect for embroidery on the front flap as well as adorable charm details. If you're interested in learning how to add embroidery to this project, visit sewingonline.sulky.com for inspiration and tutorials. The finished size of this project is 9 inches wide, 9 inches high, and 2 inches deep. Before we get started, be sure to grab your pattern. See the description below this video and follow the link to access the pattern information. All of the supplies you need are listed on the back of the pattern. This project can be made with cork fabric, faux leather, micro suede, or any other non-woven fabric that doesn't fray. So once you've decided on your fabrics, gather all of the supplies you need, cut out your pieces according to the pattern, and let's get started. Before you cut out your pieces, make sure to review the recommended fabrics on the back of the pattern cover. Select all of your materials following the materials and supply list on the back of the pattern cover. Make sure to read the introduction of the pattern because it includes important information to get started. Then continue on to the cutting instructions. Cut out all of your pieces according to the pattern. Also, it may be helpful to download and print the free piece labels sheet from our website to keep track of all of your pieces and have them organized with labels. Your main fabric will be used for the exterior pieces. I chose to use our silver splatter cork fabric. The lining fabric will be used for the bag lining and also the pockets. For this project, I chose to use our new Turtle Tex, which is a fabric we designed specifically for bag linings. It's a water-resistant material that's coated on the back side. You can iron the material with a low setting on the right side of the fabric, and if you iron against the wrong side, the fabric will fuse to itself, which comes in handy for pressing hems and pocket edges. If you decide to try the Turtle Tex fabric for your lining, you do not need any interfacing for this project, so you can skip over the cutting instructions for that. Depending on the type of main fabric that you choose to use, you may want to consider adding a layer of sew-in fleece to your project for a little bit more stability. It also depends on how comfortable you are sewing through thickness. Your bag will have a little bit more of a slouchy, soft appearance without the fleece. However, if you're comfortable sewing through thickness and you want a more structured bag, I definitely recommend adding the fleece to your project. If you'd like additional guidance and tips for cutting out materials and reading the cutting instructions of your pattern, I encourage you to visit our YouTube channel and watch our 30-day Learn to Sew challenge, where we share lots of tips for getting started. For this project, you will also need 2 nylon coil zippers. Refer to the pattern for the 2 lengths that you'll need. I'm using our natural nickel zippers by the yard. Our Sallie Tomato zippers have a nylon coil with a metallic finish, so the coil appears to be metal, but it is not. That way you can cut and sew over your zipper without having to worry about breaking a needle or damaging your scissors. This natural zipper tape is a perfect match to our natural cork fabric, since we have dyed the zipper tape to coordinate with the cork. At the end of the pattern, there is an optional zipper pull tab that can be added to your zippers. So if you would like to add that optional decorative tab out of your main fabric, make sure that you choose a zipper pull that has an opening in the center of the pull tab. This will allow you to attach the decorative pull later on. I'm using our donut style zippers. However, we have a growing range of zipper pulls on our website, so there are lots of styles to choose from. It's definitely easy to go overboard when choosing designs for our zipper pulls, so our collection continues to grow. There are a few options for hardware for this bag, whether you decide to add a handle for your strap or an adjustable crossbody strap to your bag. You could also choose to add a decorative handmade label to elevate the look of your bag, and Chicago screws to add extra detail and reinforce your side strap connectors. Again, refer to the back pattern cover for all the details and supply information. The first section of instructions is to fuse interfacing to coordinating pieces. Again, like I mentioned, if you decide to try turtle text for this project, you can skip this section of instructions and jump ahead to the next section. Otherwise, you'll want to take your interfacing and fuse one piece of the coordinating lightweight woven interfacing to the wrong side of each lining piece G for your interior. Follow the manufacturer's instructions for fusing. Next, we'll attach the optional fleece to the lining pieces. With right sides up, align all edges of each lining fabric piece G over one fleece piece G. Use sewing clips or basting spray to hold the layers together. Over at the machine, turn your stitch length to about 5 millimeters and baste 1/4 inch from the bottom and side edges. To reduce bulk, trim excess fleece close to the stitches. Just be careful that you do not cut through your basting stitches. I find it's easiest to flip the fabric over so the wrong side is face up. Another thing to note when cutting out your pieces, the right side of your fabric should be facing up when you position your pattern piece on top of your fabric. So in this case, when we cut out the pieces with the wrong side up, the piece was cut out in the opposite way. With the right side of your fabric facing up, the angled edge should lead from the lower left corner up towards the right. When we add our zipper pull, the zipper will close towards the bottom edge. However, if you prefer that the zipper pull closes towards the top edge, the bag will still function the same and the steps will still be the same throughout. So it's up to you to decide if you would like the angled edge to go from the upper left or the lower left over towards the right side. Technically, my piece of fabric was cut upside down for this tutorial, so it will not match the illustrations exactly, but since the project can be constructed with the angle going in either direction, I'm going to continue forward with the piece that I have already cut. If you do decide to cut piece B flap front in the opposite direction with the wrong side facing up when you cut your pattern piece, make sure you do the same for piece C flap back. You'll want to make sure that you have the wrong side facing up when you cut out your piece. However, just to clarify once more, if you'd like to follow along exactly with the pattern, when you cut out your pattern pieces, you will want to make sure that the fabric is right side up. The next section is optional. If you'd like to add embellishment to the front flap, skip ahead to the next section of instructions if you do not wish to add any embellishments to the exterior front flap. At this point, if you would like to add any embroidery, patches, applique, quilting, rhinestones, ribbon, etc. to the main fabric piece B flap, which is your front flap piece, you can do so using your desired method. For tutorials on how to add embroidery to your bags, visit sewingonline.sulky.com for inspiration. Just make sure that you do not add any embellishments that will interfere with the seam allowances or zipper installation. Next, we're ready to assemble the flap. With right sides up, center main fabric piece B flap front indent over the 10-inch zipper. You'll want to align the angled outer tab edges with the bottom edge of the zipper tape. If you'd like, you can apply some double-sided basting tape along the top edge of the zipper to help hold the fabric in place. Also, you'll want to make sure that the zipper opens towards your dominant hand. And also, you want your zipper pull to be within the indented section. Then we'll take this over to the sewing machine and top stitch an 1/8 inch from the indented edge of piece B. If you'd like to add a little bit more reinforcement to the wrong side of your zipper tape to make sure it stays flat, then back at the machine, top stitch a 1/4 inch along the top indented edge, starting and stopping at the same point of your previous top stitching, or even from the very side edge of your flap. It's up to you depending on the look that you're going for and what's easiest for you to sew. Next, take your scissors and trim the zipper ends 3/8 of an inch from the vertical top stitching. Make sure that you do not cut into the main fabric. Next, with right sides up, align the long angled edge of main fabric piece C over the bottom edge of the zipper tape. Allow about 1/8 of an inch of zipper tape to show between the zipper coil and piece C. Again, you can use some double-sided basting tape to hold the layers together. Then top stitch an 1/8 inch from the long angled edge of piece C, and make sure to move the zipper pull out of the way as you sew. After sewing, fold piece C to the wrong side of piece B along the zipper tape and smooth out the layers. It's okay if the back flap peeks out beyond the front flap. Add some sewing clips to hold the layers together and top stitch an 1/8 inch from each of the outer edges. After sewing, trim the back even with the front if needed. Then fold the piece in half to mark the top center along the straight raw edge of the flap. Next, we'll add the side connectors. Take one main fabric, piece A, exterior, and we're going to mark a line centered on the piece, starting from the raw edge of the indent and measuring up according to the pattern. To make sure that this line was centered, I folded my piece in half, wrong sides together, and made sure to align the raw edges. Then along the fold, I took my marking pen and added small little marks along the very folded edge, because I knew that would be my center. Then I took my ruler and I made sure to measure from the raw cut edge upward, aligned my ruler against my dash marks, and marked my fabric stopping at the measurement according to the pattern. After marking, with right sides together, position one main fabric, piece D, which is your side connector, centered on your exterior piece with a short edge above the marked line. I'm going to add a small piece of washi tape to help hold the connector in place, but you could certainly add sewing clips along the top edge. Then over at the machine, top stitch an 1/8 inch from the raw edges, creating a 1/2 inch tall box. If you're using washi tape, you can stitch directly over the tape since the tape can be torn off after stitching. Slide a D-ring over the short end of the connector that isn't sewn and fold the connector over the stitched box. You'll want to align the opposite end of the connector to the raw indent. Then we're going to top stitch an 1/8 inch from the raw edges and a 1/2 inch from the top fold of the connector. If you prefer to add a handle to your bag, you'll want to use the rectangle rings in place of the D-rings. I'm going to hold my connector in place as you sew, but you could certainly add a line of double-sided basting tape to make sure that your connector stays centered as you sew. I like to add some back stitching once I get close to the top folded edge. If you'd like to install the optional Chicago screws, which I highly recommend because it really elevates the look of this project, you'll want to install each of the screws in the center of each connector according to the pattern piece. To transfer the placement marks for each of the Chicago screws, I find it easiest to take your Veronica piece A pattern piece and fold it in half, then align the side edges of the pattern piece along one edge of your main fabric. Then take your marking pen and simply add a small dot where each of the red placement marks are printed on the paper pattern piece. This is a very quick and easy way to make sure that your placement marks are centered and in the correct position. To help support the Chicago screws, we recommend adding a strip of fleece or foam to the wrong side of piece A along the connector area. You'll want to cut a scrap that measures about 3/4 of an inch wide and 8 inches high. Transfer the same placement marks from the pattern piece onto your scrap reinforcement piece. Then take a rotary punch to punch the holes at each placement mark on your connector through your exterior as well as your support strip. Then you'll install 1 Chicago screw at each placement mark, pushing the screw through from the right side through your support strip, and then screw the opposite side of the Chicago screw in place. We always recommend adding some glue inside the screw cap before screwing the 2 halves together for reinforcement. And if you'd like a step-by-step video tutorial on how to install the Chicago screws, visit our YouTube channel and we'll show you step-by-step how to install Chicago screws. Once one side of your exterior is prepped, then go ahead and repeat the exact same steps for your remaining exterior and side connector piece. And here's what my pieces look like after the Chicago screws have been installed. Next, with right sides together, align all edges of the main fabric pieces A for your exterior. Hold the layers together with sewing clips along the right side edge. I've already went ahead and marked 2 horizontal lines, measuring down from the top edge each time. So go ahead and take your ruler, measure down according to the pattern and mark your first line. Then take your ruler and measure down from the top edge and mark your second line. Beginning at the top edge, we're going to sew with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure to back stitch once you get to the first mark. Continue sewing, back stitch at the second mark, and then continue sewing all the way down to the bottom edge. After sewing, finger press the seam allowance open. Next, I'll add some marks according to the pattern. On the right side of my fabric, I repeated the same measurements from before. Next, we'll top stitch from the right side of your fabric 1/8 inch from each side of the seam, beginning at the top edge, pivot, and stitch across the seam 1/8 inch above the first mark, then pivot again and stitch to the top edge. Repeat for the bottom portion of the seam, pivoting 1/8 inch below the second mark. Make sure your seam allowance stays pressed open as you sew. Next, I'm going to mark the zipper placement box. I've went ahead and marked the zipper placement box on the wrong side of my fabric. First, you'll measure down from the top edge according to the pattern and mark away from each side of the center. Then you'll measure down from the top edge again and mark a line horizontally away from each side of the center. Check that your completed box measures according to the pattern. Then connect the upper and lower horizontal lines by drawing a short vertical line along each of the ends to create a placement box. Next, we'll cut out the box along the solid marked lines. I like to fold my fabric in half and cut a snip in the fabric to get the cutting started. Then I'll insert the scissors into the slit and cut along the marked lines. You could certainly cut out the placement box using your rotary cutter, ruler, and cutting mat. Just be careful that you do not cut past the corners. What I like to do is cut close to the corners with my rotary cutter, then go in with my scissors and snip the corners just to make sure I don't accidentally cut past each of the corners. Next, we'll add the exterior zipper pocket. Start by pressing the long bottom edges of lining piece H and lining piece I for the zipper pocket pieces 1/2 inch to the wrong side. Like I mentioned before, if you're using turtle text, you may notice the backing of the fabric will fuse to itself, which helps your fold stay in place even more. Just be careful not to touch your iron to the wrong side of the fabric. If you're worried about melting the coating on the back, you'll want to make sure to add a press cloth or scrap of cotton fabric over your turtle text before pressing. If you need to do any pressing from the right side, you're welcome to do so. Make sure your zipper is positioned so the pull is closed towards your dominant hand. Then, with right sides facing up, align the zipper along the top long edge of piece I, which is your shorter zipper pocket lining piece, and sew the zipper to piece I with 1/4 inch seam allowance. A zipper foot or narrow foot is very helpful for this step, but if you don't have one, just take your time and make sure to stop and move the zipper pull out of the way as needed. Next, press piece I away from the zipper, making sure to keep the zipper tape flat. Position piece I wrong side up and the zipper right side up at the top. Then, with right sides of the fabric together, center piece I over piece H, aligning the top, bottom, and sides. Sew the pieces together 1/4 inch from the top raw edge. Press piece H away from the zipper, and if you have any basting tape, it's very helpful to apply it along each of the length sides of the zipper. Make sure that the lining is facing wrong sides up, then center the zipper inside the cut-out placement box on your exterior piece. Make sure the zipper pull is inside the box and press down to adhere the basting tape. Then over at the machine, top stitch the right side of your exterior fabric 1/8 inch from the raw edges of the cut zipper placement box. When stitching this step, I recommend to not start on a corner, so that way when you sew around the box entirely, you're able to backstitch over your starting point cleanly and reinforce your stitches. Next, press piece H down and align the sides and bottom edge with piece I. Use some sewing clips to only hold the layers of the lining zipper pocket pieces together. Then, with your exterior facing right side up, move the right side of the exterior out of the way and sew the pocket pieces together along the right side edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you get close to the bottom, make sure that the bottom folded edges stay folded, then repeat to sew the left side edges together. Make sure you leave the bottom edge of the pocket unsewn because this will be used as our turning hole later on. And also, it's very important to unzip the zipper at this step. Next, we're ready to assemble the exterior bag. With right sides together, align the remaining side edges of the main fabric piece A exterior. Sew the side seam with 3/8 inch seam allowance. After sewing, finger press the seam open. And we'll want to top stitch the right side of the fabric 1/8 inch from each side of the seam. I find it's easiest to do this step with the wrong side of the fabric facing out. However, if you'd like to turn your project right side out and top stitch from the right side, it's up to you depending on your machine and what's easiest for you to see and access the seam allowance. If you decided to turn your bag right side out to complete the side seam top stitching, then turn your bag so the fabric is wrong side out. At this point in the pattern, if you'd like to install a handmade label, you can install it either on the back seam or above the cut indented edge on the front seam, or you can install it 2 inches down from the top edge of the back seam. Honestly, it's completely up to you on the placement of your handmade label. Visit our YouTube channel for a step-by-step tutorial on how to install handmade labels. Next, align the bottom edges and the side seam and the center seam. Then sew the bottom edges together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure to start and stop between the corner indents. Next, with right sides together, fold and align the corner indents, centering the bottom seam with the centers of the side connectors. Over at the machine, sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance for reinforcement. After sewing each corner, turn the bag right side out. Next, we'll make and attach the slip pocket. With right sides together, fold the lining fabric piece J slip pocket in half so it measures according to the pattern. You'll want to align the bottom and side edges and either pin or clip the layers together. Sew the sides and bottom edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving a 3 inch opening along the lower edge. I like to begin sewing at one edge of my turning opening and back stitch. Sew across the bottom, then up the side edge to avoid any puckering. Then I repeat for the opposite side. After sewing, trim the corners to help reduce some bulk. Just be careful not to cut through your stitches. Turn the slip pocket right side out and turn the seam allowance at the opening to the wrong side to create an even edge along the bottom. You can press the pocket with your iron, then top stitch an 1/8 inch from the top folded edge. With right sides up, center the slip pocket down from the top edge of one lining piece, according to the pattern. Use some pins to hold the pocket in place, then top stitch an 1/8 inch from the sides and bottom edge. If you'd like to divide the pocket into 2 compartments, you can top stitch a vertical line to divide the pocket either in the center or wherever you would like, considering if you plan to have a smaller pocket for a pen or your cell phone. Next, we'll assemble the interior. I've already went ahead and marked the box to cut out of each of the bottom corners. Once you have your boxes marked, cut along each of the lines. Next, with right sides together, align the top and side edges of both lining pieces. Begin by sewing the sides together, starting at the top edge with 3/8 inch seam allowance and gradually increasing to 5/8 inch seam allowance once you reach the bottom. Repeat for the other side and also sew across the bottom edge with 5/8 inch seam allowance. Sewing a wider seam allowance will make the lining slightly smaller, allowing it to fit neatly inside your bag. After sewing, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide to reduce bulk. For a flatter finish, press the seam allowances open, then with right sides together, match the bottom raw edges of the lining and base seam. Sew together with 5/8 inch seam allowance to create the box corners of the lining. After sewing, trim each seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide. Then turn the lining right side out. Now we're ready to assemble the bag. With right sides together, position the flap centered over the back panel seam, aligning the top raw edges. Make sure that the zipper that is attached to the flap is against the right side of the back panel. Then baste in place 1/4 inch from the top raw edges. After attaching the flap, turn the bag wrong side out. Then, with right sides together, insert the lining into the bag exterior with the slip pocket to the flap side. Align the top raw edges and add sewing clips to hold the layers together. Make sure the centers of the side connectors are aligned with the lining side seams. Then sew the top edge with 3/8 inch seam allowance. This step is very easy if you are able to remove the accessory tray of your sewing machine to expose the free arm. My machine does not have a free arm, and because of that, it's a little bit more challenging to sew this step. Also, make sure your zipper pulls and D-rings are out of the way as you sew. Now it's time to turn the bag right side out. So pull the lining out of your bag and push the fabric through the bottom unsewn edge of the zipper pocket. You'll want to roll the seams and push out the corners with your fingers to flatten them and shape the bag. At this point, we'll top stitch the turning opening of the zipper pocket closed, and to do so, align the bottom folded edges and sew with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Push the lining inside the bag and top stitch around the top edge of the bag with an 1/8 inch seam allowance, making sure to keep the flap out of the way as you sew. Although our bag is complete, there are a few more steps to the pattern. If you'd like to make an adjustable strap, follow along. Otherwise, skip ahead to the next section of instructions if you prefer to add a handle using the rectangle rings. First, we'll start by joining each of the main fabric pieces F for the adjustable strap by placing the short ends right sides together perpendicular to each other. The ends should overlap by about 1/4 inch. Then sew a diagonal seam from the inside corner to the opposite inside corner. After sewing, trim the excess seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide, then finger press the seam open and top stitch an 1/8 inch from each side of the seam. Trim the seam allowance even with the side edges of the strap. Then, with wrong sides together, fold the entire length of the strap in half, matching the long raw edges. Then top stitch an 1/8 inch from each length side. You can certainly add sewing clips to help hold the fold, but with non-woven fabrics, it's typical for the fabric to want to bounce back. So usually I align the fabric edges as I sew. Next, take one end of your strap and thread the strap end from the underside over the center bar of the slider buckle and back down. Fold the strap back onto itself, so from the raw edge to the fold measures about 1 inch. Then top stitch the strap to itself. You can either do a straight line with some back stitching or 2 straight lines at an additional seam allowance. Otherwise, you could sew a box with the X in the middle for reinforcement. Now, the side with the raw edge folded against it is considered the underside. Take your thumb against the underside and guide it all the way down to the opposite end of the strap. With the underside face up, thread the opposite raw end through a swivel hook with the flat side of the hardware against the underside. Move the swivel hook closer to the slider buckle and make sure your strap isn't twisted. You'll want the undersides against each other, and thread the raw end of the strap through the slider buckle, again from the underside over the bar and back down. At this point, double check that your strap isn't twisted, and the raw end that we top stitched before should be hidden between the underlayers of the strap. Then thread your remaining swivel hook over the raw end of the strap so the flat side is against the underside. Fold the strap back onto itself so it measures about 1 inch from the raw edge to the fold, and top stitch the strap together just like before. So once your strap is complete, clip 1 swivel hook to each of the D-rings. If you chose to add a handle to your bag instead of an adjustable crossbody strap, you'll want to fold your handle in half lengthwise, top stitch each length side, thread the handle through 1 rectangle ring from the outside towards the inside of your bag, and stitch the strap to itself according to the pattern. If you'd like to add any additional reinforcement, feel free to add some of the remaining Chicago screws either to the stitched ends of your adjustable strap or your handle. And the last section of the pattern is optional. If you'd like to add a decorative zipper tab out of your main fabric, you'll want to thread main piece E zipper tab through the opening of your zipper. With wrong sides together, fold the zipper tab in half, aligning the long raw edges and the width ends. You can hold the layers together with basting tape or a sewing clip and top stitch a 1/2 inch from the zipper pull and an 1/8 inch from the remaining edges. And your beautiful Veronica bag is complete. I truly hope you enjoyed learning how to make the Veronica bag pattern, and as always, if you have any additional questions or suggestions about the pattern, please let us know. We would love to see your completed bag. Use the hashtag SallieTomato and hashtag Veronica bag on social media so we can see it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you'll follow us on social media and online for more inspiration and creative projects. I'll see you next time. And don't forget, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on future videos.